Well, good morning, you guys, and welcome back to Kids Zone. I am so thankful that you are here with me today. Last week, if you'll remember, we learned about the prophet Isaiah, who was constantly trying to tell the people of Israel about God's love for them, how he wanted to have a relationship with them. God used people like Isaiah, these prophets, to announce his good news to them. Now, God was always trying to tell them the same thing he's always trying to tell us. I love you. I am with you. You don't have to be afraid, and you can come home to me. Today, we will focus on the story of Daniel, a brave young man who devoted his whole life to loving God the very, very best that he could. In Daniel's time, things were not looking good for God's people. They had been captured and taken far away from their homeland, from the promised land, and now, once again, they were slaves in what was called Babylon. But God had not left his people, even though it might have seemed like it to them. He was with them, and he was looking after them. Now, Daniel loved God with his whole heart and obeyed him. And God made Daniel able to understand lots of difficult things. So it wasn't long before the king of Babylon noticed him, kind of like Joseph back in his day. King Darius liked how clever Daniel was. So he made Daniel his most important helper of all, an advisor, and put him in charge of lots of other helpers. But those other advisors, those other helpers didn't like this. They wanted the king to like them best. You could say that they were jealous of Daniel and wanted to get rid of him. So they spied on Daniel and they tried to find things wrong with Daniel, things that they could tell the king that would make him angry, but there weren't any. They couldn't find anything at all, except there was just one thing. Every day, 3 times a day, without fail, no matter what, Daniel went to his room, closed the door, and prayed. So these other helpers that were jealous of Daniel, they smiled to themselves and came up with this plan and said, let's get the king to make a law that no one is allowed to pray to anyone except to the king. Daniel won't obey this law and he will be punished. They were so pleased with themselves for being so clever, and they hurried off to tell the king. The king liked their idea. He didn't know that they were tricking him. He just wanted all of his people in his kingdom to like him. So he made it into a law. Everyone must pray only to me, and if you don't, the lions will have you for their dinner. Well, Daniel heard this, and he knew it was wrong to pray to anyone except God. He had to do what God said, whatever it cost him, even if it meant that he would die. So Daniel went to his room every day from that day forward again and closed the door and prayed 3 times a day. And that's just what the other helpers wanted. And they wanted the king to know that Daniel was doing this. So they happily sort of skipped off to tell the king, "Oh, your magic highness, your law says that everyone must pray to you alone, right?" "Well, yes," the king says, "of course." They said, "Oh, you wise king, then correct us if we're wrong, but it would seem that Daniel is praying to God and not to you, like the law says." Well, the king was sad because he liked Daniel and he didn't realize he'd been tricked. He didn't want to hurt Daniel, but he also couldn't change this law that he had given. And so he let the soldiers throw Daniel to the lion's den, and he said, "May your God who loves you so much rescue you." The king went back to his palace that night sad. He didn't sleep at all, not a wink. He tossed and turned until finally at dawn, when the sun rose, he leapt out of bed and ran straight to the lion's den. He cried out to Daniel and he said, "Has your God rescued you?" And to his surprise, Daniel shouted back, "Yes." God sent an angel to close the lions' mouths. And there, resting his head on Daniel's lap, was the biggest lion, purring like a kitten. The king brought Daniel out of the den. Look, he said, Daniel doesn't even have a scratch on him. And because of this, the king made a new law. Daniel's God is the true God, the God who rescues. Pray to him instead. Now, of course, we know God would keep on rescuing his people in these miraculous ways like he'd been doing for so long. Keep doing the impossible like he always had. And the time was coming when God would send a hero even more brave than Daniel, who would love God and follow God no matter what it cost him, even if it cost him his life. Jesus would be that perfect hero someday, and God was waiting for the right time to send him. And so today, take some time with the discussion questions about Daniel, and I'll see you guys next time.